Good morning. I'd like to mention that our fearless leader, Janet, is home recovering from back surgery, and she's still participating through Zoom with us. So I think she needs the Purple Heart Award. Good morning, and thank you to the Ethical Humanist Society for having us here. We are the public education team for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, Long Island. In addition to myself, today's team consists of Janet and Margaret. We'd like to take a minute to sadly acknowledge the recent school shooting in Newport News, Virginia. Abigail Zwerner was in the middle of a routine lesson at Rich Neck Elementary School when a 6-year-old boy in her class pulled out a handgun at his desk and pointed it at his teacher and fired. Officials said it was not an accident and appeared to be an intentional shooting. The gun was legally registered and owned by the boy's mother. However, it was unlocked and unsecured. Stories such as this are no longer rare. The Center for Disease Control has determined that the gun violence in America is a national health crisis. It's the #1 killer of children, surpassing cancer and car accidents. And it's a problem specific to America. If we can prevent even one child's death, we have the responsibility to do so. Please be advised that this presentation includes vivid statistics about gun violence and suicide. Additionally, we would like to inform people that although school violence mass shootings get most of the headlines, it's only a small percentage of gun violence in any area of the country. Statistically, children remain safer in school than in any other place, including home. There will be a question and answer period at the end of our program, so please hold all questions, including writing questions in the chat, until the end. We also have some helpful literature and links available for you at the back table. Here's Margaret.
Firearms are the leading cause of death for children and, Firearms are the leading cause of death for children and teens age 1 through 19 in the U.S. Every year, 18,000 children and teens are shot and killed or wounded. There were 313 mass shootings in 2022. That is 2 a day. But we know how to stop this violence. We know how to keep children safe. We don't have to live like this. Secure gun storage is a simple solution to this crisis that would have a substantial impact. It's not a partisan issue, and everyone should be behind it. That's why we're working to promote and normalize secure gun storage through programs like Be Smart. Research has shown that it to be one of the most effective ways to prevent school shootings and protect children. Here's Sharon.
On December 15th, 2012, the day after the Sandy Hook school shooting tragedy, Shannon Watts started a Facebook group with a message that all Americans can and should do more to reduce gun violence. This online conversation turned into the nation's largest grassroots volunteer network working to end gun violence. Moms Demand Action campaigns for new and stronger solutions to lax gun laws and loopholes that jeopardize the safety of our families. Here's Janet.
And so from that, the public education team and the Be Smart program were created. This Be Smart campaign was launched across 50 states to raise awareness that secure gun storage can save children's lives. It helps to teach the basics of safe storage of firearms in a home. But just as important, it also helps to begin a dialogue for those times that a child may be a guest in someone else's home. It's necessary to keep our children, grandchildren, and young adults safe, especially when they're out of our close supervision and socializing with others. This Be Smart framework is designed to help parents and adults normalize conversations about gun safety and take responsible action that can prevent senseless child gun deaths and injuries. We would like to share the most basic ideas using our acronym to be smart. Margaret?
S. S. Secure all guns in your home and vehicles. M. Model responsible behavior around guns. A. Ask about the presence of unsecured guns in other homes. R. Recognize the risks of suicide. T. Tell your friends to be smart. Here's Janet.
Every day in America, only in America, more than 110 people are killed with guns. That's 110 people a day. Sadly, the USA's gun violence homicide rates exceed not only all developed nations, but most developing nations as well. More guns equals more gun violence. Margaret?
We all want kids to grow up happy and healthy. We each have the right to make responsible decisions about how to protect our homes, families, and communities, including whether to have a gun in our home. If we can prevent even one child from gun death or injury, it is our responsibility to do so. Here's Janet.
S. Secure all guns in your homes and vehicles. Statistics show that 13 million households with children contain at least one gun. Studies have found that most children in these gun-owning households know where the gun is stored and whether or not it's secured, as we know from this 6-year-old child just last week. That is why it's vital to store guns locked and unloaded with ammunition stored separately. Hiding a gun is different from securing a gun. Sharon?
In 2019, New York State enacted a safe gun storage law, which requires everybody to lock all guns in an appropriate safe storage depository that is incapable of being unlocked without a key or a combination lock, or they should use a trigger lock. Therefore, if a child finds an unsecured weapon, it certainly is a tragedy. But it was a preventable tragedy, so it's no longer considered an accident. Unsecured guns also contribute to the staggering number of guns stolen each year. Many of these guns are sold to individuals who would not be able to purchase a firearm through legal means. I believe that 80 to 90% of gun violence would be reduced if all the states concentrated on getting safe storage regulation passed. That is an important yet doable goal. Here's our friend Scott, a gun owner, a well-known and respected gun safety advocate, to explain and demonstrate more about safe storage.
As a gun owner, safe and secure storage of a firearm is one of the most important responsibilities. It's an everyday, full-time responsibility. As a gun owner, you must always secure your firearm and ammunition separately so they are not accessible to children or any other unauthorized person. Whenever a firearm is not in use, it must be kept unloaded and locked up. Your safety and the safety of others requires that you always secure and store your firearm in a manner that will prevent unauthorized access. We know that incidents of gunfire on school grounds, the majority of shooters under the age of 18 obtain the gun or guns from their home or the homes of relatives or friends. Research also finds that secure storage is associated with the decreased risk of suicide and unintentional firearm injury among children. Now, do not underestimate the curiosity of a child. As stated in an earlier slide, children who live in a home with firearms know where they're stored. So what do I mean about securing your guns? Guns should be stored locked and unloaded with the ammunition stored separately. Hiding a gun is not safe storage. There are some commonly used secure storage practices that I'd like to show you. New York requires a gun lock to be included with every gun sale, and most often it's a cable lock like these. Now, a cable lock is fed through the magazine of the firearm, out the chamber, and back into the lock. Now, some firearms do not have a magazine well, so this cable can be passed through the barrel or the cylinder. And both of these methods prevent the firearm from being loaded or fired. Now this one here, this is a trigger lock, and like the name suggests, a trigger lock is a mechanism that fits over the gun's trigger guard to prevent the firearm from being fired. Now since the trigger lock comes in direct contact with the trigger, it's not designed to be used on a loaded gun. And like I said earlier, a firearm should never be stored loaded, but it is possible with this type of lock. Now, both types of locks here prevent the firearm from being used, but it does not prevent theft. In the United States, an estimated 380,000 firearms are stolen from private gun owners every year. And a large number of those guns are stolen from cars. Often, when a person with a carry permit goes to an establishment that does not allow that firearm, they'll put that firearm in the glove box or under the seat or even in the trunk of the car. Now, this gun box here is very inexpensive. It's about $29, and it comes with a cable. Now, this cable you could take and you could put it around the frame of the seat or any other permanent structure in the car. This cable gets inserted into this slot, put your firearm in, lock it, and for $29 you don't have to worry about anyone carrying off your firearm if they break in to the car. Now, many people own firearms for home protection, which is their right, and they'll say they need quick access to the firearm in the event of a break-in or some other emergency. Needing quick access does not justify storing your firearm under a pillow, in a nightstand drawer, in a shoebox under the bed, or high on a shelf in a closet. Now, this safe here is a digital safe, and as you can see, you could access it rather quickly. I think this is quicker than trying to open up maybe one of the trigger locks or a cable lock. So there's no excuse for saying that you need quick access. So then they might say, well, I don't want to fumble around with keys. I don't want to fumble around with a combination in the emergency, in the dark. So for those people, they can get a biometric safe. Now this safe here, it doesn't come cheap. It's somewhere about $200, $250. But I believe that is the responsibility of the gun owner to make sure that their firearm is secured safely. And if you want quick access and you don't want to mess with keys or anything like that, then it's your obligation to purchase a safe like this. This safe here, I just got to rub my finger on it. It pops open. I get my firearm. Now, they also make safes large enough to store long guns, which you can also store your handguns in, and often they're fireproof, so you can keep all your important documents in there also. So the burden is on the gun owner to secure that firearm.
M. Model responsible behavior. It is always an adult's responsibility to prevent unauthorized access to guns, not a curious child's responsibility to avoid guns. Make it a part of the normal conversation you have with your children. Keep the language simple. For example, if you see a gun, don't touch it. Tell an adult right away. Here's Scott again.
Modeling responsible behavior starts with safe storage, but it doesn't end there. Responsible behavior means a lot of things, such as knowing your firearm. A gun owner should know how to use the safety on their firearm, and they should also take some safety classes and use that firearm at a range. There are 5 basic firearm safety rules. 1, always keep your firearm pointed in a safe direction. 2, treat all firearms as if they are loaded. 3, keep your trigger finger outside the guard and off the trigger until you're ready to fire. 4, be certain of your target, your line of fire, and what lies beyond the target. And 5, always wear appropriate eye and ear protection. Now, we all know that children watch everything we do and like to copy us. That's why you may watch your tongue, or to be sure to say thank you and please in front of them. As a gun owner, it's your responsibility to teach your child that firearms are for adults only. And if they see a firearm, Do not touch it and get an adult immediately. Also, teach them that these same rules apply when they're at a friend's house or any other place. It's our job as gun owners to model responsible behavior.
A. A is for ask. Ask about unsecured guns in other homes. Make it a part of the safety conversation you have when sending your child to a new place. Try email or text. 4.6 million U.S. children live in a household with at least one loaded, unlocked gun. This is something I never thought to do, to ask if there were guns in a house, in any given house. And I don't know if I would have had the right words to say. What do you say? We've decided to provide a few role-play situations to help make us all feel more comfortable asking this vital question. Here's Margaret.
Owning a gun is a personal decision, but secure storage is a public safety issue and the law. Kids and unsecured guns are a potentially lethal combination. Fortunately, a simple conversation can help keep children out of harm's way. It doesn't need to feel strange or awkward to bring up the issue of how guns are stored. These simple conversations with your friends, caregivers, and relatives before a child or grandchild visits can help save lives. Here's Janet.
So this is my ask. When my daughters were old enough to have play dates, I began with 3 simple questions of the parents of their friends. I asked if there were any firearms in the home. I asked if the firearms were locked away securely. And I also asked if the ammunition was locked away separately. It was incredibly uncomfortable. So I tried to sandwich it in between the questions about food allergies and if there were any pets in the house. It was still very uncomfortable, but to me, my children's lives was much more important than any discomfort I was going through. I guess in today's age with texting, it makes it a bit easier to have those conversations. Anyway, once my daughters, at the young age, they never thought twice about me asking those questions. I actually had them sitting in the room with me when I was on the phone with the parents. As my daughters got into middle school, I think it became more of a source of embarrassment, unless I was the source of embarrassment to them. But they knew that I was still going to ask those questions. They knew that I was still going to make sure that I knew that they were safe. Once they got into high school, however, I gave them the opportunity to ask those questions themselves. But they always knew full well that I would check up on them and make sure that those questions had been asked. But I never had to check up on them because I always had parents reach out to me to say, I can't believe what your child asked me. Could you believe this? And they asked how I got my daughters to ask those kinds of questions. And I said it came from years of practice, routine, and modeling. And that's how I went about it. What I'd like to show you now is a role play with a mother-child scenario. I want you to take I want you to be especially aware that this mother is a member of our Survivors Network in Moms Demand Action. She's lost a son. She actually is having a fundraising event for a scholarship today. She lost a son to gun violence at 17, just as he was graduating high school with honors and on his way to college. She lost a fiance, and just 2 months ago, she lost a niece to senseless gun violence. But this is her and one of her other sons, Malik, in a role play situation.
Excited. I'm so excited for your first babysitting job. When you speak to Joey's mom, you need to ask a few questions. Ask if they have any pets. Ask if they have emergency numbers on the counter. Also ask if they have any firearms in the house.
Ask what? That's embarrassing. I can't ask about guns.
Oh, sure you can. It's an important but uncomfortable question. All you have to say is, for the safety of everyone, right? I was wondering if you had any firearms in your home. Are they locked away? Is the ammunition separate? Right? Now you try it. Let's see.
Okay. For the safety of everyone, I was wondering if you had any firearms in your home. Are they locked away? Is the ammunition separate? Hey, that wasn't so bad. I'm gonna write it down and practice it a little before I call Joe's mom.
Great job, Malik. I'm so proud of you. excited.
It is always the adult's responsibility to be smart, not a child's. Even though Shanae is teaching her son Malik to ask about guns in other homes, it is Shanae's responsibility to monitor and ensure those questions get asked properly, just as Janet previously described when having her daughters ask about guns in other homes. Here's Kay and Shanae demonstrating a situation when a child is staying with a grandparent.
It's your neighbor Kathy. How are you and your family?
Hi, Kathy. We are all well, and thanks. How have you and Jack been?
We're good, thanks. We're all good here. I have a question for you. You know, our grandson Carlo is spending a few days with us. Do you remember Carlo coming? I think the boys played together in the park. Well, he wants to know if you or James could come over to our house this afternoon. He has a new basketball he'd like to show him. Maybe they could play a little.
Well, sure. I know they had a good time playing at the park together the last time Carlo was visiting you. But I have to ask you something important. Do you or your husband have any guns at your house?
Oh, well, we do have a gun because Jack is a retired police officer. But don't worry, Carlo doesn't even know where it is. And we always told him that if he should see a gun, he's not to touch it without his grandpa supervising. I know he wouldn't. He's really a good kid.
But I've heard of many cases where kids, even good kids, do know where the gun is or can easily find it. Then they may play with it or show it off to a friend, even if they know they shouldn't. And then in a split second, a tragedy can happen just like that.
Oh my God, that's awful.
I know, and that's why New York recently passed a safe storage law. Guns have to be locked, unloaded, separately from the ammunition, and that's to keep kids and teens safe.
You know, I'll talk to Jack when he comes home. I think he'll agree. He's always been a responsible gun owner.
Good. And I'll be eager to hear how it goes, and I'll be happy to talk to him if you like. But for today, let's meet at the park. Carlo can bring his new basketball, and afterwards they can come over to my house for ice cream. We don't have any guns in our home, but we do have a cat. Carlo isn't allergic to cats, is he?
Oh, no, no, we have a cat also. But thanks for asking.
R. When I first joined Mom's Demand, I found this statistic to be the most frightening statistic of all. 2/3 of gun violence is suicide, mostly because someone who is at the lowest point in their life found an unsecured weapon. R. Recognize the role of guns in suicide. 85% of suicide attempts with a gun death, a much higher fatality rate than any other means of self-harm. This contributes to the fact that 40% of child suicides involve a gun. Here's Dr. Eve Kriev, a local pediatrician, with further insight.
My name is Dr. Eve Kriev, and I'm a pediatrician, and I'm Legislative Advocacy Chair of New York's Chapter 2 American Academy of Pediatrics that represents 1,500 pediatricians across Long Island, Queens, and Brooklyn. As a pediatrician, I see a lot of children that come in with depression or even suicidal ideation, particularly this year with the social isolation that the pandemic has brought. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the R in SMART, which stands for recognize the role of guns in suicide. Does it matter how a person tries to commit suicide? Absolutely. Suicide attempts with a gun are very likely to be deadly, whereas suicide attempts with other means have a much greater chance of survival. You can see here all the different ways that people might attempt suicide, and by far, firearm attempts are much more likely to be fatal. And this slide tells you just how impulsive a decision it is when people make the decision to commit suicide, with 24% of the time making that decision within 5 minutes. And the case of teens attempting suicide with guns, that's a very tragic decision, because teens, as we know, are very likely to be impulsive and make impulsive decisions and think about killing themselves. And if a gun happens to be accessible to them, it'll be a very tragic choice. An average of 4 American teenagers commit suicide every single day. Most young survivors of a serious suicide attempt do not commit suicide later. And most survivors of suicide attempts were glad that they were saved. So that's the most tragic thing to me of all, just because we know that people who have survived suicide attempts, they regret it almost immediately. Whereas, you know, children and teens who commit suicide with a gun, you know, they're not going to be able to survive most likely, and it's just tragic. 17% of high school students seriously considered attempting suicide within the last year. 17%. Every year, more than 600 children, 17 and under, die by suicide with a gun. 600 children a year. Does a gun in the home increase the chance of suicide? Yes. In states where there are more guns, more people commit suicide. Studies have shown that the risk of suicide is 4 to 10 times higher in homes with guns than in homes without guns. And if the handgun happens to be stored loaded or unlocked, the risk of suicide is even greater. The risk of dying by suicide is 4 to 10 times higher in homes with guns. So if your teen or child is at risk for suicide, please remove guns and ammunition from your home. The American Academy of Pediatrics advises that the safest home for a child is one without guns. The most effective way to prevent unintentional gun injuries and suicide to children and adolescents is the absence of guns from homes in the communities. If you must have a gun in the home, keep it unloaded and locked up with a trigger lock and store those bullets in a different place than the gun is locked away. Don't let teens have a key to those places where the guns and bullets are stored. And if a teen becomes depressed or is at risk for suicide or is having mood swings even, please just store that gun outside the home. These are some signs that you might want to look for in your children and teens that might be experiencing depression. If their mood changes, they seem irritable, they're having feelings of hopelessness, rage, they're getting into conflicts with the family, fighting a lot. If they seem to be having behavior changes, they're stepping away from their regular personal relationships, not wanting to text or video chat with their friends. If they seem to lose interest in activities that they normally enjoy, their hobbies, their sports, their music, that's a red flag as well. If they have sleep difficulties or if they're sleeping more than usual, that's another big sign that we see. If they have no appetite, if they're having trouble concentrating, or if their grades are falling at school, if they seem not to be caring about how they look and not really paying attention to their personal hygiene, you want to think about depression. If they seem to be partaking in really risky behavior with their friends, another red flag there. Or obviously if they're expressing thoughts about death or suicide, that's something to be alert to. Here's some resources that you should take down if you have concerns that someone you know might be feeling suicidal.
T, tell your peers to be smart. Your voice and all voices are critical. Research shows that law enforcement, the military, and the hunting or outdoor groups are particularly effective at communicating safe storage practices. Someone hears the Be Smart message every 21 minutes. Margaret?
According to the, sorry guys. According to the FBI, the months during the pandemic have been the highest months on record for firearm sales. During the pandemic, fear induced people to go out and purchase firearms. As life returns to normal, we need to do everything we can to make sure that these new gun owners are aware of safe storage and their responsibility to be smart for kids. If our message prevents even one child's death, it will be worth it. Here's Janet.
Margaret, why don't you go back and talk a little bit about your experiences with the reunion you had with your former colleague?
Yeah, will
here,
do.
here's one.
I have it. Recently, again, sorry, guys. I'm the one who did most of the presentations in my previous life, but I've forgotten about that. Recently, I had a reunion with my former colleagues. Some discussion focused on my current activities, and I mentioned my mom's work and the Be Smart programs. As a matter of fact, I even handed out Be Smart cards, which you'll find on the table after the presentation. A few days later, I got a call from my friend Kim, and she seemed sad. Through the tears, she told me how she had left the card on her dining table. Marin, her 12-year-old granddaughter, had stopped by and saw the card. Marin started talking about junior high and how kids talk and the lockdown drills and all the kids that could get hurt if something happened, and how 7th grade is not easy and some kids are angry. Grandma, what would happen if some kid found his dad's gun that is under the bed? Grandma, every kid knows where their mom and dad hide things. I'm a grandmother, and it hurt my heart. I told Kim I was so sorry our children must go through this, but maybe talk to her daughter, and a Be Smart Safe Storage presentation could help. Here's Janet.
So this is my tell. I was an elementary school teacher for 33 years, and we began having active shooter drills just after the Sandy Hook murders. When we heard the code words over the PA system, the teachers knew there was a dangerous person in the building. But as a K through 6th grade school, we were always discussing how to have this conversation with children. You obviously have to speak to a kindergartner differently than you'd speak to a 6th grader about a dangerous person in the building. One of the other things that we struggled with was that we were told we could not open the door if we heard a child outside our classroom door for fear that it might put the other children in our classroom in danger. But as soon as we heard that sound, we knew the students knew to quickly crouch in the corner of my classroom, away from windows, away from doors, and they nervously watched as I walked towards the door to make sure that it was locked securely. As I turned around and walked back to those 23 innocent little faces crouched in the corner of my classroom, they were always quiet and calm, but I could see in their faces there was fear, there was concern, and there was seriousness. And I believe they probably saw the concern in my face as well. But I think the most jarring moment of those drills, which to this day, having been retired for 5 years, I still can hear it in my head, was the sound of the door jiggling. The principal and the assistant principal would come around to check that the doors were locked. My students, not knowing that it was just a drill, were terrified. They heard the door jiggling like someone was trying to get into our classroom. It was such an intense experience for the students as well as for me as the teacher, that I shared this with parents. It usually happened before back to school night. And at back to school night, I took the opportunity to share that experience with their parents. But I also took that opportunity to tell their parents about safe storage and about having conversation with other parents. So that was my opportunity. I'm going to go over quickly the steps, if I can, to Be Smart, just to review. S, secure guns in homes and vehicles. M, model responsible behavior. A, ask about unsecured guns in other homes. R, recognize the risk of teen suicide. And T, tell your peers to be smart. Here's Sharon.
A great source for statistics about gun violence in any given state is at www.everystat.org. I've sent this information as a PDF to Tina if anybody wants a copy of it. And all those emergency phone numbers that and all that information that Dr. Kriev talked about, we have at our back table over there. We will stop with the last slide, which has the important phone numbers and websites that we discussed earlier. Thank you to all who attended our presentation, and please help us spread the word to Be Smart. It's now your turn to do your part and share the T part of our demonstration. We are encouraging everyone to write to their local school districts and strongly request that our Be Smart for Kids program be presented to teachers, parents, administrators in your local school district. It doesn't matter whether you have children in the district or not. You still live there, you still pay school taxes, you have the right to demand a safe neighborhood. We will provide templates at the back table also for you to take home. You can do this as an email, or you can do this as a handwritten letter or typed, however you want to do it. School superintendents, principals, whoever you can think of. We will now open it up to any questions specific to the information in our presentation. Thank you.